You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Evening all. It's the 15th of May and also the 15th episode of Skills World Live. That's right, folks. Doesn't time fly by when you're in lockdown? And all you have to look forward to each evening is the ramblings of a tired old former house music DJ. Your loyalty is appreciated, though. Indeed, what we never really expected when we first launched the show only 3 weeks ago is just how quickly the FE sector would embrace it. So thank you from the whole Skills World Live team for all the listens and the likes. We are eternally grateful. Of course, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues in FE to tune in as well, either live or in playback. We're on all your favourite podcasting sites, including Apple, Spotify and SoundCloud. So just head over there right now and hit subscribe. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, marks another key milestone. Not only our 15th episode of the live format of the show, but alas, the last episode Kelly O'Mara will be the editor of, well, at least for a while. Would you believe it? The sharp elbows of Gavin O'Mara, husband and co-founder of FE News, has nudged the real brains behind the operation to one side and decided he can't miss out on the growing ratings bonanza of this FE community radio show. Because we are the anti-COVID-19 phenomenon that has taken the FE sector by storm. Gavin just wants to make sure he's there at the Palladium this time next year to pick up a gong and share in the glory when we finally make it to the annual Audio and Radio Industry Awards. And talking of awards, tonight we honour the people that the skills world we inhabit is all about. The pupils, the learners, the students, and not forgetting the wonderful apprentices. For this evening, we are dedicating the entire show to the voices of the real people that matter. Young people, older people, all kinds of people who, through the power of study and learning by doing, make our country and the world a much better place to live. Stand by, folks. I'll be talking to the young apprentice ambassador and founder of the Apprentice Voice, Dexter Hutchings. Joining us from Wales, I'll be speaking to Eluned, Parrott, a self-declared transport nerd and the director of the Unite Foundation. An apprentice member of iFate's new panel, which is there to sound out the learner voice, will be joining us this evening, as will a couple of world skills competitors. And at the end of the show, we'll be talking to the WhiteHat company, a pioneering tech startup that has made waves, helping young people and non-graduates access apprenticeships with blue-chip companies in some really exciting careers. But first, let's find out what's making the news headlines in your skills world this evening. The exams watchdog in England, Ofqual, has published further guidance for awarding organisations and their centres about when it expects calculated grades to be submitted for a range of general and vocational qualifications. This includes further clarification about how to calculate GCSE English and Maths. Following publication of a 10-page document yesterday, Ofqual confirmed the window for all FE providers to submit their tutor-assessed grades and ranking of students will need to be made between the 1st and the 12th of June. The regulator also said that final grades will be standardised by subject area, not by institution. It means that some colleges can expect to see their students' grades adjusted by Ofqual before the final results are published later this summer. The regulator also issued further guidance today to help teachers avoid unconscious bias, as well as to ensure that the estimation exercise now being carried out because of the pandemic complies with equalities legislation. In other news, the Skills Minister Gillian Keegan has made it clear that she expects apprentices to be treated the same as other learners in terms of getting some face-to-face time with their tutors when the FE sector will start a phase reopening at the start of June. The Department for Education has updated its guidance to include not only 16 to 19-year-olds studying GCSEs, A-levels and vocational subjects in England, but also those on apprenticeship programmes who might benefit from face-to-face training, as well as the continued online teaching many of them have received since the social distancing restrictions began. And finally, a student at Westminster Kingsway College has put his trainee chef skills to good work during the lockdown by cooking up scrumptious meals for National Health Service workers. Benji Nathan has been volunteering in his brother's catering company and supporting a North London community organisation called You Donate, We Deliver. The promising young pastry chef has also been continuing his studies by watching the online masterclasses his college tutors have been sending him since March. Benji said he was not only picking up new skills and really enjoyed cooking for the NHS, but one of the first things he planned to do when the restrictions were fully lifted was to bake his 95-year-old grandmother a cake, complete with hand-piped flowers on top. That's all your Skills World News from fenews.co.uk.
You're listening. Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Bewick, @FENews. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111.
Let Me Know in Time by a Skills World Live favourite artist, Thomas Skiedelberg. Now, a number of you have contacted me about that track since I played it on my alter ego DJ Van Allen mix last Friday. It seems that track went quite far and wide too, including being reminded of a blast from the past. On Saturday, I received a LinkedIn message from my old flatmate in Ibiza town nearly 2 decades ago, who used to be a DJ and Elvis impersonator at the Super Club, Manumission. He still lives on the island, now running a successful lifestyle company for the many A-list celebs that visit the beautiful Balearics each summer. Howard Boyle, if you're listening, thanks for getting in touch. Great to hear from you. Moving on with the programme. And as I said at the top of the show, tonight's discussion is all about the learner and the apprentice voice, with press headlines demanding university students get their tuition fees partially refunded, and some frustrated training providers saying they can't get their apprentices beyond the gateway because of a lockdown on endpoint assessments. We thought at Skills World Live it was time to ask the people who are closest to tonight's theme. Are apprentices and students getting a good deal? It's a pleasure now to be joined on the line by Eluned, who is the director of the Unite Foundation, Unite Students, and Dexter Hutchings, co-founder at the Apprentice Voice. Good evening, both.
Hello there.
Hi, Tom.
Thanks for joining us this evening on your Friday evening in lockdown. How's things?
No worries.
Yeah, good.
You're welcome. It's not like we were going somewhere else.
Well,
Yeah.
That's the thing, about doing this show. I can usually guarantee that people will be at home between 7 and 8 p.m. Eluned, let's start with you, and an obvious question, really. I mean, do you think currently, as a result of COVID-19, that students and apprentices are getting a good deal?
So my charity works with care experienced and estranged young people, and I think that the challenge here isn't so much around the value for money question. We're down to a survival situation. We're getting calls at the moment. We're getting research responses that say that more than 60% are worried about their ability to earn enough money to cover their basic bills. So in terms of whether or not it's a good deal, it's a slightly longer term question. The immediate concern is, can we get through this week?
Indeed, and that's a very important group, actually, that you shine a spotlight on there, and perhaps we'll go into a bit more detail about that shortly. Not least, I've got to express a personal interest. I'm chair of the Care Leavers Trust here in Sussex, and indeed I did grow up in foster care myself, so I know some of the challenges of trying to get through the summer if you haven't got any income coming in. But Dexter, you're working in marketing and communications at the independent UK Edge Foundation, a charity shaping the future of education. What's your perspective on how well both students and apprentices have fared in the current environment?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this, obviously it's a very broad question, and I think personally, I think it is kind of, obviously we talk about value for money and quality of learning, but obviously, as was mentioned, it is the underpinning factor of having enough money to live on. And something that we found in the Apprentice Voice survey was that many young people were already struggling financially on the apprentice wage. So it is something that obviously we've considered as well.
Yeah, I mean, that apprentice wage, of course, is very low. And it's quite shocking that surveys have often found that not all employers, but certainly some employers don't even appear to be paying the legal minimum apprentice wage either. I mean, I'm sure you've picked that up too in your travels, Dexter.
Yeah, so I think majority of employers obviously do pay above the minimum apprentice wage, but like you say, there are definitely surveys out there. The National Pay Survey suggests that some employers still aren't paying the national minimum wage for apprentices.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's an extraordinary low figure as it is. So to be earning anything under that is not affordable, and you simply cannot live on that. And I think especially during these times where some of these people may be earning only 80% of that, I think it is really worrying.
And you certainly probably can't live independently on that, which sort of brings me on to what you were talking about there, Ellen, about a very vulnerable group in our society, too often looked after but also overlooked. 1% of the youth population, but too often overrepresented in some of the more negative aspects of life, like, for example, street homelessness. I mean, how in terms of your charity and your interaction then with the authorities, what sort of things are you looking to put in place to support that really important group of people?
Well, the first thing we did was to work with charities like Become, Standalone, Neckle within the university sector, and Spectra, who deliver the Care Leaver Covenant, to do some research into what the immediate challenges were. So we did a survey in the first week of lockdown just to ask young people what it was that they were experiencing. But one of the challenges we have, and I think that this is very much reflected in the apprentice voice as well, is that there is an assumption about what a student looks like, what an apprentice looks like. We assume that they're young. We assume that they have no family to support. We assume that they do have a family home to go to. So apprentices are assumed to be able to live with their parents and to be able to support themselves because the wage isn't enough to live independently on. And similarly with young people in universities, the student maintenance support system, which does vary from nation to nation within the UK, but that support system makes an assumption that young people can support themselves with work or by going home to live with their parents over the summer months. And that just simply isn't the case at the moment. We've seen a catastrophic collapse of the student and young person employment market. We've seen the kind of temporary, part-time and casual work that these students rely on just disappear overnight because they are very much overrepresented in areas such as hospitality and cafes, bars, restaurants, and those jobs aren't in existence at the moment, and they don't necessarily have the kind of security that a furlough scheme would have given them. So we are literally facing a situation where those assumptions about this homogenous group of students has left those who don't fit the normal mould completely out in the cold. We need to make sure that those voices are heard and heard really, really clearly if we are to deliver the kind of support that's going to enable those young people to survive. And for many young people who are care leavers or they're estranged from their families and they don't have that family capital to draw on, the choice they're facing over the summer without work to be able to support themselves is to face real hardship, worries about eating, worries about getting a roof over their heads, or alternatively to drop out of the studies that are going to improve their life in the long term in order to be able to claim benefits. That is not a choice that a responsible and a responsible nation that values education should be forcing our young people into.
Do you think there's some very practical things that devolved administrations, local authorities and others, including universities, could be doing for care leavers, as you say, regardless of what age they are, because you can't make assumptions about the sort of family or other capital support networks that these leavers have, whether they're in the statutory system still below the age of 25 or indeed they're beyond that. I mean, my charity, for example, supporting that group goes right up to the age of 30. I mean, some might say even that's too young. I mean, I thought it was interesting that Coventry University announced last week that it was, for example, making sort of free rent available in its student halls all year round for a group of care leavers. I mean, would you like to see more of those kind of initiatives? Because after all, it's 1% of the youth population, and in relative terms, it is a small number of individuals in our society, isn't it?
Yes, so I'd very much like to see more of those kind of schemes. And in fact, it is what the Unite Foundation does. Our core work is that we provide free accommodation, year-round accommodation for young people who are estranged from their families or statutory care leavers. But there are also other examples of where universities have done this off their own bat. So York University, for example, has introduced a scheme very much along those lines. I think what I would say, though, is, I don't want to be critical of what universities are doing because at this point in time, they are under pressure financially and they also are pulling out all the stops to deliver some really good services. So we see from our university networks, we see examples of how they're delivering wellbeing support services by Zoom meetings and things along those lines. They're delivering counselling on that kind of format, and it's in many cases it's working well. I mean, it's difficult, it's awkward, but it's better than the other alternative, which is not to have those services available to you. But what we have to recognise as well is that not all students are university level students, higher education students, are in higher education institutions. Many of them are
further education
studying.
and training providers as well. Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly. So some, vulnerable students, particularly those who've had a disrupted educational experience in their childhood, are very much more likely to be represented in higher education courses in further education colleges. And further education colleges very often don't have the halls of residence to be able to deliver those kind of things.
Yeah.
They don't have the size and scale of wellbeing teams. So I personally believe that what we really need to see is a national response to this current crisis.
Okay.
We need to
and when you say national, do you mean UK-wide or obviously a Welsh national government response, given we have a full-country approach to education skills and care support these days?
National to each of the four nations.
Right.
So Scotland have already delivered an emergency grant for care experienced and estranged young people to help them get through the summer. And I'd like to see the other UK governments follow suit. In England, we're talking about over 10,000 young people in that bracket. In Wales, it's around 500. Scotland, it's around 2,500 young people. In Northern Ireland, it's around 350.
Okay. Well, let's bring Dexter back in now, because I'm just sort of conscious we want to make this a three-way discussion. And Dexter, I mean, you heard a reference there, obviously, to the looming youth unemployment challenge and general unemployment challenge. And indeed, we had a whole programme dedicated to this last week. I mean, what sort of, as the apprentice voice, when you think about potentially the impact that this is going to have on existing apprentices, the impact it might have on employers recruiting new apprentices, or indeed even retaining the ones that they've got now, what sort of challenges do you see lying ahead?
Yeah, so obviously our thoughts are with kind of any apprentices that have lost their jobs throughout this difficult time. So first of all, that's the kind of main thing that we need to look into. And I know the government have set out guidelines about how they want to get those apprentices back into jobs. And I think we need to make sure that does happen. But also the next step is, I suppose, then looking into recruitment in the future. I think apprenticeships are great for kind of getting people from disadvantaged backgrounds into kind of great roles that they may not have the opportunity to get through other routes. So to me, it's key that we kind of make sure that those apprenticeships are available to young people at all levels. And I think as we talk about the stats, the majority of apprentices aren't young like we think. So I think that
stats show 2/3 of them actually are over the age of 25.
Exactly. So I think one of the key things we should be doing now is actually kind of changing that tide and putting pressure on employers to focus on giving those opportunities to younger people. I think for me, especially, I'm a strong believer that we need to focus apprenticeships on young people, and we need clear definitions of what an apprenticeship is, because I think we've got so many different budgets at the moment that are going to different places, and we need clarity on kind of who fits into which budget and where the money goes.
And that's a really live discussion. I mean, I think those at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, also those at the Department at the Education Skills Funding Agency, I think will be looking at the scope of the apprenticeship programme going forward. But as the Apprentice voice, I mean, just say a bit more actually about that organisation. I think it's a fascinating name. I mean, is it really about, I mean, in my view, is it like a trade union for apprentices? Is that how you see it?
So, I mean, we're 3 apprentices that kind of came together after meeting at an event. We was actually speaking to Gillian Keegan just over a year ago, which is obviously quite funny now that she is in the skills position.
Payback time.
But we were actually talking to her, and it was kind of, she's obviously always been an ambassador for apprenticeships, and there was gaps in her knowledge that we thought shouldn't maybe be there. So we actually decided that we'd come together and kind of start focusing on how we can make those changes. So from the beginning, we were kind of looking at the cost of travel and how we can kind of increase accessibility for apprenticeships whilst also giving current apprentices kind of a better deal.
Well, it sounds like you've really got your work cut out, never mind obviously your day job working at the Edge Foundation. Eluned, I've got sort of 30 seconds. I mean, just sort of final word to you about apprenticeships in Wales then? Because obviously it's different from England. They're still following the apprenticeship frameworks. They don't have standards. The levy is obviously distributed or spent differently in Wales. I mean, is there anything about the apprenticeship programme in Wales that you'd want to change? I'm thinking, again, back to care leavers. In England, for example, you can get an extra, I think, £1,000 on the funding band if you take on a care leaver. Is there anything like that in Wales? Eluned, are you still there? Or have I lost you?
Hello,
Eluned. I thought I lost you then for a moment. Yeah, I don't really
Sorry,
heard.
you just there for a moment.
Yeah, I don't really heard that final question I asked you just about apprenticeships in Wales.
So obviously apprenticeships in Wales are funded on a completely different basis to the English system.
Yeah.
I don't work with apprentices, unfortunately, so I don't know the details of what's available in terms of support to care leavers in that circumstance.
Well, Eluned Parrott of the Unite Foundation and Dexter Hutchings, who's co-founder at the Apprentice Voice. Thanks so much for joining Skills World Live this evening.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd. You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my desire. Now all I have to do is to make you mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. Like a song, like a perfect melody. Baby, don't say you don't believe in me. 'Cause you know, and I know, we're onto something good. You know, and I know, we got something good. I've been waiting for the one forever. Finally I got you, baby, here in my heart. When I'm with you I feel so much better, oh yeah. Before you I was just a shell, so stuck in the dark. You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky, oh. There's nothing missing now that you're my desire. Now all I have to do is to make you mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. Like a song, like a perfect melody. Baby, don't say you don't believe in me. 'Cause you know, and I
Little Heaven. We had a double bill there. Not least, I needed the extra time just to work out some of the technical difficulties sometimes of running a community live radio show when you're having to do all the creative output and the technical output and all the sound engineering all at the same time, and call up 3 wonderful guests. And I'm delighted that we've actually got them all on the line. We're joined by Lewis Curtis, who's on the Institute for Apprenticeships Apprentice panel. Good evening, Louis.
Hi, how you doing, Tom? Pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And Lewis Boyle from Leeds College of Building, Painting and Decorating. You still on the line?
Yes, still here, Tom.
Yeah, brilliant, Lewis. And finally, last but not least, Abigayle Johnson, also Leeds College of Building, Painting and Decorating. Good evening, Abigayle.
Good evening.
Good evening. Louis, let's start with you. So tell our listeners then about the iFate Apprentice panel. What exactly does it do?
So we're integral to the Institute's thinking. We give the apprenticeships voice directly to stakeholders within the Institute. We've recently released a survey that is aimed to assess the quality and content of the apprentice learning experience, the training that they receive, and whether their apprenticeship meets their aspirations in the future. And we're trying to get as many apprentices to fill it in as possible to form our decisions and form our feedback to the Institute stakeholders. So I've been on the panel now for 2 years, and I've seen it evolve rapidly with the apprenticeship reforms transitioning from frameworks to standards.
Right.
And we're a diverse group of apprentices from up and down the country, different levels of apprenticeships, and with the interest of representing our industry and our regions.
Brilliant. Lewis, you're from Leeds College of Building, Painting and Decorating.
Yes.
And I mean, tell us what drove you particularly to choose that career path.
Well, I've always had kind of an artist streak in me. I've always been quite good at art in school, well, during school and whatnot. And I didn't really want to do sixth form. I just wanted to kind of get out there and start earning money. So I kind of looked about, and apprenticeship was kind of what I was looking for. So I reached out to a few companies, and Bagnalls were the one that got back to me first, and I've been with them ever since, and I kind of haven't looked back, really. I mean, painting and decorating has opened so many doors for me. I mean, I've painted everything from people's front rooms to lampposts to doing loads of industrial work and stuff like that. I mean, I never thought I'd have done anything like this, being a painter and decorator. I thought it'd been quite boring.
Yeah. Sure.
And
well, I mean, everybody needs painters and decorators, and importantly, everybody needs really good painters and decorators. Anyone that's like me trying to do an amateur just knows how difficult it is. Now, Abigayle, despite sort of all the advances you might say in breaking down barriers for careers for women in recent decades, I mean, have you encountered much sort of prejudice or second glances, when you've told your folks you're a painter and decorator?
I get it all the time, especially when I'm at work. I get loads of people like, oh my God, a lady painter. It's still not a big thing anymore. Everyone's always surprised.
It's such a novelty, isn't it? Yeah, people do see it as a surprise. But what drove you to have a passion for that area then? I mean, Lewis obviously made that reference to always being a bit of an artist. I mean, is that where it started for you as well?
Yeah, very, very similar. I actually did 2 years at art college when I left school, but it didn't really take me anywhere. And I went to like a career advisor to talk about my interests and stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, and both of you. I mean, I was looking into your wonderful biogs earlier. Now, you're both competition winners in relation to skills, not skills world. It's actually the way around. It's world skills. Now that is a pretty prestigious thing to be a part of. I mean, it's like the skills Olympics, isn't it? I mean, tell me more about that. Your experience of being part of world skills.
Did you want first, me or Lewis?
Abigayle, you go first, and then we'll come on to Lewis. Yeah,
that's fine.
Go on, Abigayle.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah. So what's it like being part of World Skills then?
It's fantastic. I'm sort of like famous in the painting world. People sort of know my face from like magazines and stuff that have been in the painting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is an amazing competition. Obviously there's the UK-based ones, and then there's the ones that happen overseas, both at European and at world level. So what level have you competed at so far, Abigayle?
Well, I did the UK one.
Yeah.
I came third in that. But because of my age, I can't progress to the World Skills.
Right, okay. So you've been cut off by the old age factor. What about you, Lewis? You're a World Skills competitor and winner as well, no less. What's your experience?
Yes, my experience was great. Like I said before, I will never look back in my career in doing so. I mean, I was in the same final as Abby. The competition was full of
right, you had to compete against each other for the same college. That must have been amazing.
Yes, yeah, unfortunately.
Oh God, your chances of that happening, eh? That's amazing.
Abby came third and I came second.
Silver and bronze.
But obviously, because I'm quite a bit younger than Abby, I managed to get through, and I am now training with World Skills to either go towards Euro Skills, which will be in Graz, I believe.
Yeah. Well, that's
in January, and then possibly to Shanghai in 2021, 2022.
That's an amazing place. Well, fingers crossed, the travel restrictions aren't still in place in early 2021. Louis, let's give the final word to you. I mean, the Institute for Apprenticeships Apprentice panel has just, I think, appointed, is it 20 new members? What kind of plans has the panel got then going forward? What would you like to see the Institute doing?
The way we're set up is we've got around 2 apprentices that feed into each route panel, which is essentially a collection of employers from the industry that are involved in designing each apprenticeship standard. I think with our current plans, we're going to be closely aligned to the route panels to ensure that our voice, our views, and the information that we gather in the survey is used to drive further quality into the new apprenticeship standards. And I think that with the information that we gather from this survey, I'd like to think that we're going to meet with people from different stakeholders within the Institute, but also at a governmental and industry level, and take these findings back and keep driving best practices and where there might be area for improvement to come up with solutions for it.
Yeah, well, you've got 2 other apprentices on the line you could talk to as part of the survey if they haven't filled it in already. But I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Absolute pleasure talking to the 3 of you this evening. Louis Curtis, Lewis Boyle and Abigayle Johnson. Thanks for joining Skills World this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
I'm tired of waiting.
That was Howman, Tired of Waiting. I think we've had that track on Skills World Live before. Now, to close off the show, it's been fantastic tonight. We've heard from learners, we've heard from apprentices, we've heard from people who are working at the front line with some of our most vulnerable young people. And I'm delighted now to be joined by Euan Blair, who's co-founder of the WhiteHat company, and also his colleague, Gafar Fashola, who is the apprentice leader. Euan, when I Googled your company earlier, you came top of the rankings alongside some retail sites, of course, selling traditional white hats. But tell us why you founded your tech startup and why it's called WhiteHat.
So I guess the answer to the first part is that white hats are hackers who use their tech skills for social good.
Right.
So we often talk
That's
about
why you're top of the
ourselves.
rankings.
Yeah, quite.
Great. Really good.
We often talk about ourselves being career hackers for young people who are trying to navigate their way.
Right.
And I think, look, white hat exists really because university as a one-size-fits-all model is broken.
Mm-hmm.
It's failing to move the dial sufficiently on social mobility, but also it's not giving people the skills that they need to be successful as the entire labour market is changing. And so we thought it was incumbent to go and build an alternative in order to create this kind of outstanding, different model to university and allow a diverse group of future leaders to succeed.
Gaffer, you're the apprentice leader at Euan's company. Just explain to our listeners exactly what that entails.
So being especially an outreach leader as part of WhiteHat, there's many different teams that the apprentices can get involved with. I'm part of the outreach, so we focus on sort of expanding the apprenticeships throughout the country, not just with WhiteHat, just to show, like Euan just said, the traditional university route is very much broken in the day and age that we live in at the moment. So it's just telling apprentices, going out there, speaking to young children that are sort of at that prime age to start thinking about their next careers, that, oh, wait, there's another alternative to university. And as Euan said before, with the labour force of today in the world, apprenticeships are becoming more and more desired because you get on-hand training whilst obviously aiming to get that qualification as well.
Yeah, and I think as you're both hinting at, obviously university, whilst it can be absolutely the right pathway for young people under the age of 30, it's still only ever going to meet broadly 50% of the cohort. And I guess there's that whole challenge, hasn't there, been around the other 50%. I mean, you talked about university being a broken model, but are you completely happy with the way the English apprenticeship model works at the moment?
Well, there's a couple of interesting things in what you just said. I guess my challenge with the characterization of the other 50% is there are plenty of people at the moment in the 50% who go to university who actually don't particularly want to go or aren't really excited by it, but are sort of being funneled in that direction by a system that where received wisdom is basically that's the only way you can be successful and have a great career. And if you look at the kind of companies we're working with and the careers we're offering people, you can do some of the world's best jobs at tech companies and in professional services and doing lots of really interesting things without getting a university degree. And the apprenticeship system in this country is not perfect by any means, but what the apprenticeship levy's done is it's allowed employers to look at apprenticeships in a completely different way because ultimately they are buying those apprenticeships. It's no longer directly funded by the government in the same way. And that's led to a lot of them to rethink what great looks like and actually challenge a lot of apprenticeship providers in terms of giving them something that they would be happy to pay for rather than something that's simply supported by the government.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's, in terms of the levy paying employers, and I think it's worth reminding our listeners, it's still a relatively small number of firms that actually pay the levy, even though it supports the whole system. I think it's about 2% of firms. And I think what's been really interesting since the levy was launched in 2017, of course, is that there's huge underspend as well in some of those levy accounts. I mean, as someone that's actually working day in, day out with these levy-based companies, what do you put that sort of underspend down to?
So a lot of it is down to the paucity of really great quality provision. I think that is absolutely a problem, and it's something that we're spending a lot of time trying to solve. Yeah. I think part of the challenge is a system that is probably not as flexible as it could be, and actually not in some of the ways people traditionally point out. But one of the challenges is when you have a system that is rapidly zooming towards 500 to 1,000 apprenticeship standards, it's incredibly difficult for employers to navigate, and it's also difficult for people looking to do an apprenticeship to navigate.
Yeah.
We'd be much better off having fewer but much broader apprenticeship qualifications in areas like tech and digital or leadership and management, and providing more flexibility for under those kind of individual banners for apprenticeships to be delivered that are giving employers what they need at that point in time and still can be recognised as a really great qualification.
Okay, well, let's hold on to that thought about flexibility, and perhaps we'll come back to that shortly in terms of the future of the apprenticeship program, not least in a sort of post COVID-19 new normal. Gafar, I mean, you're the apprentice leader. You're obviously working with a lot of the WhiteHat apprentices. I mean, just give us a flavour of the kind of apprenticeship employed status apprenticeships that are on offer, and the kind of companies that you're working with at the moment.
Yeah, so I mean, WhiteHat's done a very good job in terms of partnering up with some pretty big names in I mean, we have apprenticeships in BP. I myself, yeah. So I myself, I'm in British Land. We've got many Sky. So a lot of big names that the apprentices are obviously being partnered up with, and I think that's down to WhiteHat's values in terms of making sure that their apprentices are in the best sort of environment to help them. It's very easy for a company or a apprenticeship provider to sort of just, okay, we put you in a place but it doesn't actually fit the apprentice. But what WhiteHat does is kind of tailor make that their sign up to making sure that the company is as good as a fit for the apprentice as it is for the other way around, vice versa, as the apprentice would be for the company as well, which is something that I'm very proud to be a part of. I completely love the company that I'm working for, because WhiteHat continue to obviously support throughout your apprenticeship journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it sounds, and just going on your website earlier, I mean, you've really found a gap in the market, haven't you, in terms of being able to intermediate between, obviously, those young people, indeed not so young people, who want that opportunity of learning by doing, learning and earning, as I often call it, and with some really great companies doing exciting careers. I mean, it's a bit of an indictment in a way, isn't it, that colleges perhaps and other training providers don't appear to have been able to plug the same gap, Euan?
I think a lot of it depends in terms of what it is you're trying to do. And we've been very clear from the start that the ambition isn't just to build good apprenticeship programs or deliver apprenticeships more effectively. It's building an outstanding alternative to university. That's our vision.
Right.
And if you're going to do that, you need to be doing much more than just training and work for an apprentice. You've also got to have this big community element that's such a focus of ours, where there are meetups, socials, sports teams, societies. Now, that's all being done virtually at the moment, but it's still really successful, and it's helping keep apprentices motivated and engaged. Because what you don't want is a system where you say, well, people who want to work and learn or can't afford it, or just want to jump into a career immediately, get a very sort of functional experience, and then students who go off to university can actually go and explore lots of things they're interested in. We think it's essential that apprenticeships and apprentices are still getting access to mind-broadening activities, be it some of the brilliant speakers we have on our speaker series, through to things like, we do virtual yoga sessions, live gaming nights, virtual drinks, lots of different ways for apprentices to feel part of something greater than just their work and their training.
Yeah, just to add
go on. Sorry, Gafar. Yeah, please carry on.
Yeah, I think the community aspect at WhiteHat is ingenious. I think that's the best word to describe it, because a lot of misconception with young people at the moment with apprenticeships is, okay, but I'm not going to get this university lifestyle. I'm not going to be able to have all these socials if I don't go to university. Whereas WhiteHat has given a completely different, and I would say a more enjoyable alternative to that. The community hub is fantastic in terms of the things that we're exposed to, the sort of different working professionals that we're able to network with. That is such a strong benefit for me, myself, in my career, should I say.
Totally. I mean, it's a really strong point, because Euan referred to this earlier about perhaps those people who accidentally find themselves on a university campus. But of course, we know from all the surveys, and indeed, I certainly know from my own experience, first in my family to go off to university, but it was much about the, shall we say, the extracurricular activities as it was the learning itself. And it sounds like WhiteHat has obviously tried to really address that issue as well, because it's fine saying that learning and earning is the right sort of pathway, and arguably university, I sometimes describe it as the pay and pray model, but still it's it's 3 years, it's 3 years doing something, meeting new social groups, exploring the mind, and all the other things that students explore, which arguably is not always available to an apprenticeship. I mean, looking forward, Euan, over the next 12 to 18 months, and obviously this incredible challenge we find ourselves in as a country, as a global community with the coronavirus. We had a whole programme the other night on, for example, could youth unemployment get up to 50%? And I spoke to someone from the Resolution Foundation who's done some major research who thinks it could certainly get up to 27% by the end of the year. I mean, how should the apprenticeship programme respond to that? And is there a danger that it kind of gets hijacked by politicians as a sort of youth employment matework scheme if we're not careful, rather than a high quality skills and apprenticeship scheme?
That's definitely a challenge, and I think we need to be really clear. And again, coming back to this outstanding alternative piece, if you think about university, when it's done well, a lot of people credit it with changing the direction of their lives and actually giving them access to a whole suite of opportunities.
Yeah.
We need to be just as ambitious about apprenticeships, and that spans the kind of applied learning that you can deliver. I emphasize applied learning because actually we're increasingly seeing, and Gen Z is the first generation to really say academic learning, and the kind of learning that happens in a classroom or a university is no longer the best type of learning.
Yeah.
And that's really important. The kind of jobs that you're giving people access to, you need apprentices to be able to access jobs that are just as high quality as the jobs graduates can. And of course, we're showing that, and there are others that have shown that too. And then this community piece, what you do is you create something that is genuinely aspirational and appealing to a really broad group of people. And when I look at some of the things we're working on in the future at WhiteHat, it's really how do you expand that ecosystem that sits around apprenticeships? Because if you think about the thing that students have is that lifestyle, and what you can expect from it is really well defined, or has been historically.
Yeah.
Be that Freshers Week through to graduation ceremony and other things. We need to do the same thing in apprenticeships. And increasingly, we're looking at how can we have apprentices living together more? How can we help them get great deals on finance? How do you build some of that ecosystem?
Fantastic.
And the really interesting thing at the moment is universities are met with this massive challenge because people have been paying, as you said, often for a lot of that extracurricular stuff. Well, in a post-COVID world, and certainly in the midst of COVID at the moment, they can't access that in the same way. And it's really going to challenge the university value prop, especially when there are credible alternatives.
Yeah. Well, look, what you're doing is absolutely fascinating. I think anyone listening should definitely head over to the WhiteHat website and take a look at the wonderful work that you're all doing there. Euan Blair, co-founder of WhiteHat, and apprentice leader Gafar Fashola, thank you very much indeed for joining Skills World this evening.
Pleasure, Tom.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
What a great discussion we've had this evening. Really enjoyed that. So tonight, folks, as I think I've mentioned at the top of the show, this is Kelly O'Mara's last episode of being editor, at least for a while. The husband-wife dynamic duo at FE News, like Batman and Robin, have decided it's time for a shake-up at Skills World Live Enterprises. Yep, the Bruce Wayne of Gotham City has decided she just can't take my song selection on Epidemic Sound any longer. So, in her last executive editorial act, I've been press-ganged into playing one final request from that independent music site of choice, Epidemic Sound. No, seriously, Kelly. It's been fantastic working with you and Ellie Hansen on getting this FE community radio show off the ground. And thank you for putting up with me and, crucially, putting all the successful foundation stones in place. Next Monday, we'll be welcoming Gavin O'Mara as the new editor of the show. He's already got off to a flyer, folks, persuading England's Skills Minister, Gillian Keegan, to come back on the show for a live interview with me next week. So let's play out now, in gratitude, with Kelly's personal music request from Spring Gang with Lakeisha Nugent.
Love should be easy, why should it not? When all you want is to be loved, is to be loved. But love ain't easy, you taught me that. I let you in, now you want out, now you want out. I don't understand why you hurt me. I don't understand why you wanna let me down. Can't understand, was it all worth it? You play me good just for a rush, just for a rush. So now I wrote a song about us, with tears running down my face. Now I wrote a song about us, just trying to fill that empty space you left behind. You left behind, you left behind. You left behind. You left behind, you left behind. Can someone help me to find love again? 'Cause all I want is to be loved, is to be loved. Can someone free me from all my doubts? Feels like a prison, I want out, now I want out. I don't understand why you hurt me. I don't understand why you wanna let me down. Can't understand, was it all worth it? You play me good just for a rush, just for a rush. So now I wrote a song about us, with tears running down my face. Now I wrote a song about us, just trying to fill that empty space you left behind. You left behind, you left behind. You left behind. You left behind, you left behind. So now I wrote a song about us, with tears running down my face. Now I wrote a song about us, just trying to fill that empty space you left behind. You left behind, you left behind. Oh, you left behind. You left behind, you left behind.
Subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk/Skills World.